June of 1944. The port city of Cherbourg, Normandy. A German soldier lies motionless in the dirt outside a small cafe, his fingers still wrapped around a grenade he never threw, his body twisted in the final seconds of a life that ended in the chaos of urban warfare. The cobblestones around him are stained dark, the air thick with the smell of cordite and dust, and somewhere in the distance, the last shots of a dying battle echo through narrow streets that have seen more blood than sunlight in the past 72 hours. This is what victory looks like when the smoke clears, when the shouting stops, when the only sound left is the wind pulling at torn shutters and the slow creak of a shattered door swinging on its hinges. The photograph, taken in those final hours, captures more than just a body and a broken street. It captures the price of every inch, every doorway, every block that had to be taken by force from an enemy who had been ordered to never surrender, to fight until there was nothing left to fight with. The soldier lies in front of the cafe, his uniform caked in grime, his weapon gone, and beside him, painted on the wall in fading white letters, is a sign that reads Luftschutzraum, German for air raid shelter, a cruel irony considering there was no shelter from what came for this city in the last days of June. The shutters above him are ripped apart, hanging loose like broken teeth, the windows behind them blown out and gaping, shards of glass scattered across the threshold like frozen rain. The street itself is a graveyard of rubble, broken stone, splintered wood, shell casings glinting dully in the pale light, and the whole scene sits in an eerie, terrible silence, the kind that only comes after the guns have gone quiet and the living have moved on, leaving the dead to mark the places where history turned. Cherbourg had been declared a fortress city by Adolf Hitler himself, a stronghold meant to hold at all costs, and the Germans defending it had taken that order to heart. American forces, spearheaded by the VII Corps, had pushed through hedgerows and farmland for weeks after the D-Day landings, crawling through Normandy's brutal bocage country where every field was a trap and every tree line hid a machine gun nest. By mid-June, they reached the outskirts of Cherbourg, and what followed was not a battle but a siege, a grinding, house-to-house, room-by-room fight through a city that had been turned into a maze of fortified positions, minefields, and kill zones. The Germans had blown the bridges, flooded the lowlands, and wired entire blocks with explosives, determined to make the Americans pay for every street they took. The fighting was vicious. Close-quarters combat where rifles gave way to grenades, where men kicked indoors not knowing if they'd find an empty room or a burst of machine gun fire, where the smell of burning wood mixed with the stench of bodies left too long in the summer heat. For days, the VII Corps pushed deeper into the city, calling in artillery to blast German strongpoints, using tanks to smash through barricades, sending infantry forward through smoke and fire to clear buildings one at a time. The defenders fought back with everything they had: snipers in bell towers, anti-tank guns hidden in alleyways, squads of soldiers dug into basements and refusing to retreat even as the walls crumbled around them. But by June 26th it was over. The German commander, realizing his position was hopeless and his men were out of ammunition, food, and hope, finally surrendered, and more than 30,000 prisoners were taken, exhausted, filthy, some of them boys barely old enough to shave, others hardened veterans who had fought on the Eastern Front and knew what defeat looked like. The port itself, the whole reason for the battle, was a ruin. The Germans had sabotaged the docks, sunk ships in the harbor, demolished cranes and warehouses, leaving behind a tangle of wreckage that would take weeks to clear before a single Allied supply ship could unload. But the city was theirs, and with it, the Allies gained their first major deep-water port in France, a lifeline that would keep their armies fed, fueled, and moving inland toward the heart of occupied Europe. This photograph, taken in those first quiet hours after the surrender, shows what that victory cost, not in grand strategic terms, but in human terms, in the bodies left behind, in the shattered buildings and empty streets, in the exhausted faces of the men who survived, and the silent stillness of those who did not. The soldier outside the cafe is nameless in the photograph, just another casualty in a war that produced millions. But his presence tells the story of the entire battle, of a city that became a killing ground, of men who fought and died for streets they would never see again. The cafe itself, with its broken windows and torn shutters, looks abandoned, forgotten, as if the people who once sat at its tables and drank coffee in the morning sun had vanished into memory, leaving only the ghosts of what used to be. And yet, despite the destruction, despite the death, life would return to Cherbourg, slowly at first, but inevitably, because that is what cities do. They rebuild, they remember, and they move on. Today, more than 80 years later, that same building still stands on that same street corner in Cherbourg, and if you walked past it now, you might not notice anything unusual. The walls have been repaired, the shutters replaced, the windows reglazed, and the street has been swept clean of all the wreckage and blood and broken stone that once covered it. But the shape of the building remains the same. The curve of the doorway, the angle of the roofline, the placement of the windows, all unchanged. A quiet continuity between past and present that makes the photograph all the more haunting. The cafe operates again. People sit outside in the summer, sipping wine and laughing. Children run past, chasing each other down the sidewalk. And the street hums with the ordinary rhythms of peacetime life, completely unaware that beneath their feet lies the memory of a battle that changed the course of the war. The sign that once read Luftschutzraum is long gone, painted over or removed, but the space it occupied on the wall is still there. A faint rectangular shadow where the letters used to be, visible only if you know where to look. And if you stand on that corner and close your eyes, you can almost hear it. The distant rumble of artillery, the crack of rifle fire, the shouts of men advancing through smoke, and the final, heavy silence that falls when the fighting ends and the dead are left where they fell. That soldier, lying outside the cafe with his hand still gripping a grenade, is gone now, his body recovered and buried, his name perhaps recorded in some military archive, or perhaps lost to time. But his image remains, frozen in black and white, a reminder that every street we walk, every building we pass, every city we visit carries within it the echoes of those who fought and died there. Cherbourg was the first major port, the first fortress city to fall, the first proof that the Allies could take and hold ground against an enemy that would rather destroy everything than surrender it intact. The battle for Cherbourg didn't just open a port, it opened the door to France, and through that door poured the men and machines that would eventually drive across Europe and bring the war to an end. But on that quiet street corner, in that photograph taken in the last hours of June 1944, none of that mattered yet. All that mattered was the cost, the silence, and the soldier who would never see home again. The war moved on, the armies marched east, and Cherbourg, battered and broken, began the long work of healing. But the memory of what happened there, captured in that single photograph, remains, a testament to the men who fought, the streets that witnessed their sacrifice, and the cities that rose again from the ruins they left behind.